On July 27, 2024, at the Paris La Défense Arena in France, at the Paris Olympic Games, a 23-year-old Australian swimmer named Ariarne Titmus walked confidently to the pool blocks for the women's 400-meter freestyle final and delivered one of the most anticipated and highly hyped races in the entire history of the sport. Ariarne Titmus swam the women's 400-meter freestyle in 3 minutes, 57.49 seconds. She defended her own Olympic title from Tokyo. She defeated Canada's Summer McIntosh, who took silver in 3 minutes, 58.37 seconds, and she defeated 7-time Olympic champion Katie Ledecky, who settled for bronze in 4 minutes, 0.86 seconds. The international media dubbed it the race of the century, a phrase previously reserved for Ian Thorpe's legendary showdown against Michael Phelps and Peter van den Hoogenband at the 2004 Athens Olympics. Titmus became the first woman in the entire history of the sport to win 3 Olympic medals in that single event across 2 separate games. "It's a little bit more emotional, this one, than the first one," Titmus said afterward. "I probably felt the pressure for this race more than anything in my life, to be honest." That Paris victory turned out to be the final competitive chapter of an extraordinary rivalry between Titmus and Ledecky, widely considered one of the greatest rivalries in the entire history of swimming. On October 16, 2025, Ariarne Titmus announced her retirement from competitive swimming at just 25 years old, ending an 18-year career that included 8 Olympic medals and 9 World Championship medals. Katie Ledecky is widely considered the greatest female distance swimmer in the entire history of the sport, with more Olympic gold medals than almost any swimmer alive today. But it was Ariarne Titmus who ended Ledecky's stranglehold on the 400-meter freestyle, defeating her not once, but twice at consecutive Olympic Games, while also holding the world record in the event simultaneously. Before her retirement, Titmus left behind a legacy that permanently reshaped women's distance freestyle swimming forever. But you need to understand the full story of how a teenager from Tasmania became the swimmer who finally beat Katie Ledecky on the biggest stage in the world. Ariarne Titmus was born on September 1, 1998, in Launceston, Tasmania, Australia. In 2015, at just 14 years old, she and her family relocated from Tasmania to Queensland, Australia, seeking better training opportunities and elite coaching resources that were simply not available on the island at that time. Soon after the move, she began training under coach Dean Boxall, who had previously coached Olympic gold medalists Stephanie Rice and Liesl Jones, giving young Titmus access to a coaching pedigree few teenage swimmers in the country could match. Titmus marked her arrival on the global stage in 2018 with 2 gold medals and a silver medal in freestyle events at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games, delivering an early statement of her extraordinary potential on home soil in front of an adoring Australian crowd. That same year, she set a new women's short course 400-meter freestyle world record, clocking 3 minutes, 53.92 seconds, a signal that her long course ambitions were only just beginning. Her true breakthrough came at the 2019 World Championships, where the young Australian took gold in the 400-meter freestyle, ending Katie Ledecky's 6-year unbeaten run in that exact event in front of a stunned international audience. It was the first unmistakable sign that a serious challenger to Ledecky's dominance had finally emerged on the international stage, one that would go on to define the entire next Olympic cycle for both athletes and reshape the landscape of women's distance freestyle for years to come. At the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, Ariarne Titmus made her Olympic debut and delivered immediately under the brightest lights of the Games. She secured her first Olympic gold medal by defeating then-world record holder Ledecky in the 400-meter freestyle with a time of 3 minutes, 56.69 seconds, winning by less than a full second in a performance that shocked the entire international swimming world watching from around the globe. Titmus's time was the second fastest in the entire history of the event at that point in time. She also captured gold in the 200-meter freestyle, setting a new Olympic record with a time of 1 minute, 53.50 seconds, while the then-defending Olympic champion Ledecky finished a stunning 5th place, a result that surprised even the most seasoned swimming analysts. In the 800-meter freestyle final, Titmus earned silver, finishing just behind Ledecky's winning time in a hard-fought battle that showcased both swimmers' remarkable depth across multiple distances. The rivalry between the two swimmers had officially begun in Tokyo, and it would go on to define women's distance freestyle swimming for the next 3 years, leading into Paris, captivating fans and analysts across the entire global swimming community throughout that period and generating headlines well beyond the sport itself. Between Tokyo and Paris, Titmus, Ledecky, and Summer McIntosh traded the 400-meter freestyle world record back and forth across multiple seasons in one of the most competitive record chases in the entire history of swimming. Ledecky had set the record at the 2016 Rio Olympics. Titmus trumped it in 2022, sending a clear message that the balance of power in distance freestyle was shifting. McIntosh, then just 16 years old, surged onto the scene with her own world record mark, proving that a third-generational talent had entered the conversation. Titmus reclaimed it 4 months later, in July of 2023, at the World Championships in Fukuoka, Japan, clocking 3 minutes, 55.28 seconds. That performance set up the ultimate showdown at the Paris Olympics, where all 3 swimmers who had held the world record over the previous cycle would race head-to-head for Olympic gold. A race that lived up to every single ounce of its enormous billing and anticipation from fans and media around the entire world, with pundits debating for months beforehand which swimmer would ultimately prevail when it mattered most. Titmus's path to greatness carried significant personal sacrifice that few outside her inner circle fully understood at the time it was happening. 8 months before the Paris Olympics, she underwent surgery to remove benign tumors from her ovary, an experience that she later described as having rocked her mentally and forced her to reconsider what mattered most in her life, beyond swimming and competition entirely. Despite that serious health scare, Titmus pushed forward and delivered arguably the best performance of her entire career in Paris, defending both her individual Olympic titles under immense pressure and scrutiny from the Australian public and international media alike, all while carrying the private weight of a health scare that most fans never knew about until well after the Games had concluded. She has since spoken candidly about how that difficult period forced her to look inward and reevaluate her priorities, a process that ultimately contributed to her decision to step away from the sport entirely just over a year later, at what many considered the absolute peak of her competitive career and physical abilities. Drop a comment right now and tell me what you think about Ariarne Titmus's legacy in the sport of swimming. Do you think she is the greatest Australian female swimmer of all time? Do you think her rivalry with Katie Ledecky was the greatest in the entire history of swimming? Do you think she made the right decision retiring at just 25 years old? I read every single comment you leave below in the section. Dean Boxall, Titmus's longtime coach, built her from a promising Tasmanian teenager into an Olympic champion capable of dethroning the greatest distance swimmer in the entire history of the sport, a transformation that took years of meticulous, demanding training. He understood her potential from the very beginning of their partnership back in Queensland, and he guided her through health scares, immense Olympic pressure, and one of the greatest rivalries the sport has ever witnessed on the world stage, never wavering in his belief that she could reach the very top of the sport. Boxall famously became known for his intense emotional coaching style, celebrating Titmus's victories on deck with a passion that captured the attention of fans around the world during her Tokyo breakthrough, becoming almost as recognizable a figure in Australian swimming as Titmus herself during that unforgettable Olympic cycle and the years that followed. July 27, 2024, Paris La Défense Arena, the women's 400-meter freestyle final, the race that would decide the true champion of an entire era, billed by many across the swimming world as the race of the century, long before the swimmers even reached the blocks. Titmus, Ledecky, and McIntosh entered the pool together, each having held the world record at some point over the previous Olympic cycle leading into this defining moment. The race was tight from the very first lap, unlike Titmus's more comfortable victory in Tokyo 3 years earlier against a similar but less battle-tested field. Titmus pushed hard through the middle portion of the race, refusing to let either Ledecky or McIntosh pull away from her at any point during the grueling middle laps where so many distance races are ultimately decided. Coming down the final length of the pool, she held her position and touched the wall first in 3 minutes, 57.49 seconds. McIntosh took silver. Ledecky settled for bronze. Titmus had become the first woman in the entire history of the event to win 3 Olympic medals in this single race across 2 consecutive games, a feat that may not be matched for generations. Ariarne Titmus retired from competitive swimming on October 16, 2025, with 8 Olympic medals, including 4 gold, and 9 World Championship medals to her name across an 18-year career that began when she was still a young girl in Tasmania. She had ended Katie Ledecky's dominance in the 400-meter freestyle not once, but twice, at consecutive Olympic Games, while also holding the world record in the event simultaneously during that same period, a level of dual dominance rarely seen in the sport. Since her retirement, Titmus has focused on her loved ones and worked on campaigns to help young athletes access sports facilities across Australia. Using her platform to give back to the sport that shaped her entire life and identity from a very young age and gave her a global stage most Australians could only dream of. She has also joined Seven as a broadcaster for the 2026 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, moving from the pool deck to the broadcast booth for the very first time in her career, offering fans a new perspective on the sport she once dominated so completely. Katie Ledecky remains one of the most dominant swimmers in the entire history of the Olympic Games, but it was Ariarne Titmus who proved conclusively that even the greatest distance swimmer of all time could be beaten repeatedly on the biggest stage in the entire world against the deepest possible fields of competition. Their rivalry, described by both athletes as one built on mutual respect rather than animosity, produced some of the most memorable races in modern swimming history and elevated the entire sport's global profile in the process. Titmus had originally planned to return for the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028, chasing one final Olympic swan song before walking away from competitive swimming for good and closing out her career on her own terms. Instead, her decision to retire immediately after that extended hiatus surprised the entire swimming community, closing the book on her competitive career at the absolute peak of her powers, rather than risking a slower decline in the years that followed. So here is the question. Was Ariarne Titmus the greatest Australian female swimmer of all time? Was her rivalry with Katie Ledecky the greatest in the entire history of the sport? Did she make the right call, walking away at the peak of her powers, rather than chasing one more Olympic Games? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to be here as we continue covering the legends who redefine swimming forever, subscribe right now. Ariarne Titmus proved that even the greatest legends in the sport can be beaten.